are back with another episode of Life and Law. And tonight, our special guest is from Rockland County, New York, Antonella. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And did you want to just start off by telling our listeners just a little bio, a little short history about yourself?
Sure. I'm a mother of two, daughter and son. First generation Italian American, grew up with lovely parents from Sicily, immigrants, and my dad, came to this country to give us my mother and us a better life. New York, and as my career, I dental assisted for many, many years. And then when I had my two children, my ex-husband and I at the time thought it was best that I would be a stay-home mom, which then, unfortunately, then when I was going through my divorce, it put me in a bad situation because during my divorce, I had, and at the time I didn't know what narcissistic abuse was, but that's when the narcissistic abuse progressed. So, yeah, and I'm open to talk a little bit more about that as well. On top of, additionally, with the judicial abuse when I was going through my divorce in the Rockland County Supreme Court. With a presiding judge, Judge Sherry Eisenpress. And you can look her up. Not many positive articles on that particular judge.
Okay. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand how deep coercive control and narcissistic abuse can really go. And usually a lot of times people think like, if somebody's getting abused, then maybe they'll be physically abused. They might have bruises, but people seem to forget that things like financial abuse and coercive control and things like that can be really, really damaging emotionally and psychologically. And
Correct.
did you find that going through your divorce and with being a stay-at-home mom that you were in a position where you were more vulnerable to financial abuse in the marriage and after?
Yes, the financial abuse started right from the beginning when we first got married. I was still working as a dental assistant, and the first thing he did was he started to take my paycheck. It wasn't a significantly high paycheck, but it was money that I earned. And he started with that to wind back when we were getting married. He asked that I wipe out my savings account. And that should have been the first red flag. But of course, you're thinking he's making these decisions for my best interest, and for us, right, as a couple. And so, you're in love, right? You think these are all positive things, but that should have been the first red flag. I should have realized. And then when I had my daughter, and being a stay-home mom, that's when the control progressively got worse. It became more of a mental, emotional, financial abuse, all of that. And little things like, you don't know how to manage the finances. And that's where he then controlled all the finances. I didn't know what was coming in and what was coming out, In fact, I later on found out when I had to hire a private investigator during my divorce proceeding. I later found out when I was, I was home with my daughter. He was opening up credit card accounts under my name. And so then it was getting worse with him controlling the money. We had a joint account, and it was always a zero balance. And if I needed to write a check, whether it's for my kids with school or whatever, he would then just put that amount in. He was the one who had the control of how much it would go into the account where then I could write the checks. So I had no control over the savings. I didn't have a debit card that I was able to use. It was a credit card where there was a limit. And toward like the end where like right before we started, with the divorce, um, I started noticing that this limit, I would go to the grocery store and my credit card would decline. And these were just little tactics of just embarrassing me, controlling me, almost like, you know, just kind of sending that message. Don't know how you have a $200 limit when you're grocery shopping for a family of four. But these were things he was asking for: receipts to make sure that the money was going toward groceries or how much I was paying for groceries. It really became very, very abusive, with the financial control.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women don't realize, like, when you find yourself in that position as a stay-at-home wife and a stay-at-home mother, and you're not bringing in your own income, it's degrading to have to ask your husband for money to be able to buy, basic things like groceries. And at the time, did you want to work, and was he pressuring you to stay home?
I did. That was something we talked about when my daughter was born. I was like, okay, I would like to go back part-time. Um, the first year of my daughter's life, there was so many little medical issues she was going through that at that point, I was very focused on making sure she was healthy and figuring out what was going on. So it it sort of was talked about, and then it kind of was for, I knew I had to be there for my daughter. And so yeah, it never, really, I just ended up just staying home full time. When I had my son, 4 years later, then I had my son, I did try, after he was at an age where he was going to preschool, I did try going back to work part-time as working in a preschool, because I have an early child certification as well. And I thought, okay, that's a nice little, I'll be on my same schedule as my kids while they're in school. And that wasn't a lot of, it was a very small paycheck. He started that financial control, right? Asking me for that paycheck. Um, which I couldn't understand, because, this is a man who was very successful, was able to focus on building his career, because I was able to take care of the kids, take care of the household. And I wasn't that person that went out and spent money on myself. Anything that was spent was primarily for the children. Um, and he knew that. He knew what was I spending on, whether it was shoes for the kids, whether it was clothes, whether it's, books, anything that was for the children. Yes, he provided a vehicle that he chose, a vehicle that he felt he he wanted to, so it was very controlling. Yes.
And so
Unfortunately.
you guys had joint bank accounts with both names, but you had no way to access those accounts?
I don't believe it was joint bank accounts. The only thing we had that was joint was a checking account with a zero balance. And that was where I would have to ask him, listen, I need to buy books for the kids. It's book fair. A lot of times these, school events, they ask for check. Um, and so I would tell him, I don't know, I'm going to spend, $50 on books, for both kids. And he would put $50, exactly like that amount. I didn't have access to like online. I just relied on, he put $50. I knew I could only spend $50. There were times that checks bounced, and it was another embarrassment. And, they would come to me, at the school and say, hey, this check bounced. And I would have to then, and it was just this like unnecessary back and forth. It must have been just like, that typical tactic to embarrass me, to explain myself, to explain why. It was just, it was very, very manipulative, the whole relationship.
And what about when it got to the point where you wanted to get divorced? Did he use money as a weapon?
Yeah, he threatened me that I would have nothing. I'm going to take everything away from you. No one, would ever want to be with you. No one wants to be with someone with kids. No one's going to raise my kids. No man is going to raise my kids. Meanwhile, he was the girl that he was cheating on me with. She lives in the house, like he brought her in the house. I have pictures of like family pictures with his parents, in these family pictures. So I was very, like a one, sided way of thinking like, oh, you're going to have nothing, go, you're going to live out on the streets, go have your parents support you. You can't survive without me. Just very, but I was working before we got married. So, but he thought maybe he put me in a situation where I had lost everything, right? Like I stopped working. I stopped, I lost all my friends. He controlled me who I was allowed to hang out with. It had to be his friends' wives. It was so controlling. He thought, I'm going to take all that away, your house, your car, your child, everything. I'm going to take everything away. And now you're going to have nothing because all those people that you had before we got married are gone. Like, you lost all that because he took it away, so that was the manipulation that he had made me, feel like I wasn't going to be able to survive this divorce or survive after the divorce. And he did make it very he did use the legal abuse. That's where the legal abuse comes in, and the judicial abuse, because he found the right judge who was very involved in racketeering in the case that, my type of divorce case.
And so you mentioned him trying to essentially isolate you from your support systems and make
Yes.
it so you didn't have people to turn to. And that's a really common tactic in narcissistic abuse. And did you feel that as time went by, you started to notice more signs of narcissistic abuse and coercive control, cheating, things like that, where he was emotionally?
Honestly, not to cut you off, honestly, I didn't see it until I was going through my divorce, and where I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? The way I was being treated, and the thing, and these very restrictive court orders, and how my children were taken away. It didn't make sense. They didn't have any solid evidence on me to do what they did to me. I was very suspicious, and once I started researching and communicating with other victims, I started realizing, and that's when then I started to investigate. During the marriage, like I was too afraid. He had put so much fear in me that I really did not see it. And then later on, I said, how could I have been so blind? But it's true. You are like, you're so brainwashed. They make you feel like you don't see it. He didn't even give me the opportunity to even investigate or see it, because he had put such burdens on me, whether it was because he was traveling. My focus was making sure my children were safe and healthy and happy. And so I didn't see all this until I started going through my divorce proceeding.
And now you dealt with the divorce in Rockland County. Can you speak a little
Yes.
bit about how the structure is in New York and how they operate with the family courts and the divorce system?
Yeah, I mean, in New York, in order to get divorced, it's this, you go through the Supreme Court. In some cases, um, parents will go to family court first, figure out custody arrangements, and then if there's financial that they need to deal with, then they bring it to Supreme Court, and that's where you get the divorce. In my case, my ex-husband went straight to Supreme Court in front of Judge Eisenpress. where he knew he was able to proceed with the racketeering. And, family court is mainly custody, visitations, child support, and if you need like order protections, things like that. That you can get state paid funding, which is unfortunately our, taxpayers' monies. And so, yeah, you're entitled to an 18B, which is an assigned attorney that's paid through the state. You could even, a very big standard tactic in the family court is supervised visits. And now you'll see here in Rockland, we have the RYE organization where they're profiting a lot, on these supervised visits. And that can be paid through the county. It could be paid through the state. They'll give you a discount rate. I mean, it's a joke, right? Discount rate on paying for supervised visits. And of course, the parents are going to pay for it because number one, they threaten you to say, show consistency, show that you want to see your kids, right? They put that on you. They weaponize you with that. And then they also say like, in order for you to get any sort of custody or visitations, you have to go through these supervised visits. Supervised visits are supposed to be temporary, not permanent. So they go by like maybe 3 to 6 months. Occasionally it's a year. It really depends. But in Rockland County, they make it pretty much permanent because they see that they're making money. In Supreme Court, everything is paid privately. So what this Judge Eisenpress was doing was if you had 4 kids, she assigned 4 separate attorneys, not one. That usually it's one attorney through family court, the state, and it's usually funded by the state, right? They get an attorney's assigned to whether you have 1 child, 4 children, to the children. In Supreme Court, the judge has that option, the authority to say, oh, you have 4 kids, I'm going to assign 4 separate attorneys. And usually their hourly rate is $350, $400, right? And then they start assigning forensic, they start appointing, it's selected by the judge. They have one particular forensic evaluator. And that's when a forensic evaluator comes in, and which then can, I don't want to say determine, but make their recommendations on custody. So the judge can then use that. And so what Eisenpress was doing, she was using a particular forensic evaluator, Mark Mednick, up in Goshen, New York. He used to live in Rockland. He moved up to Goshen. And that was her appointed forensic evaluator, which became more of a fixed report. And so the judge would have the upper hand on telling this evaluator who should have the custody, right? In my case, when they used Mark Mednick, when you have a forensic evaluation, it's supposed to be sealed. It's mainly used for a custody trial, and then it's sealed, it's done. You're not supposed to pass it along. It's very, in fact, I can't even get a copy. How all these other people were able to get a copy, I don't understand. But what Eisenpress and my ex-husband's attorney, Kim Rayner, was doing was they were asking the judge to hand any person that was involved in the case. And then she gave Mark Mednick the ability to appoint his colleagues on who was going to be the parent coordinator, who was going to be the family therapist. And so they were adding on family, and that was more money out of my pocket. And I was being court ordered. Now, remind you, my ex is the money spouse. I'm still not working. It's during a pandemic. I was a stay-home mom for 13 years. And I'm being court ordered now to try to pay these people that Mark Mednick selectively picked to be part of the case, right? And if I don't pay it, I will go to jail. Knowing my financial state, right? And so that's where I started seeing, okay. And then I was told I had to pay a privately paid therapist because she kept saying I was mentally ill. She then continued to say I was mentally ill and I was court ordered to be reevaluated. There was no findings, but yet she still loved to use that I was mentally ill. It got to a point where then she was bringing in my children in open court, which is not something that a judge normally does. But she was bringing the children in, and basically before they would walk into court, I was being harassed to say that I had to tell my kids, I'm not well, you need to live with your father. So I was being threatened. Of course, I didn't agree to that because it was not true. And then she would torture my children in court, basically saying, you need to listen to me. You can't ever live with your mother. And this was off the record. When I tried asking for transcripts, everything was like I wasn't able to get any transcripts on this. It was all off the record because the children were in open court. And so that needs to be sealed. It was all, it's all like stupid nonsense. But this is how it went from this forensic evaluator and how it started to turn into him choosing who's going to be, part of the case, who's going to control whether I should be a mom or not, sort of manipulating me, saying that I need to tell my children that I'm crazy. Like, this is what the courts do, you know?
So now
But to
when
go
you
back
went,
on the topic, sorry, about the difference between Supreme Court. Yeah, I mean, that's the difference. In matrimonial Supreme Court, the judge has the upper hand on what she allows. She court orders a lot of, whether it's attorneys, it's all private paid. So that's when people start becoming, start dealing with financial, burdens.
so let's back up a second. So when you first entered the Supreme Court system, was it your ex-husband who filed for divorce or did you file?
So the way it happened was I was the one who wanted the divorce because I started seeing it was getting very hostile. He was traveling a lot more. I suspected there was another woman, but of course I didn't have evidence, right? And he would say I was crazy. Um, and he attacked me. He tried choking me out, literally in front of my daughter. My daughter witnessed it. She was traumatized. I took the kids and left. Because Rockland is a very small county, unfortunately, my ex must have made a couple of phone calls, and the police officer that interviewed me grew up with him and his family, him and his brother, which then he convinced me not to press charges, um, and I didn't. But then once he realized what he did, and I believe it was a setup, he quickly called his attorney. He obviously had an attorney set up prior to this incident and filed as a petitioner. I mean, as a plaintiff in the Supreme Court. Yes. So then he filed.
And did you hire an attorney right away once you found
So
out?
no, not right away. I did consult with one because I didn't know what to do. I was very, taken back. I consulted with one. She was advising me to, maybe go to like the Center for Safety and Change, or, all these little things, because she saw that there was obviously domestic abuse involved. Um, but then my ex quickly came and was like, maybe we should just not move forward with this. So there was a 2-year period where I thought he withdrew the um, the divorce, but apparently he did not, and it was still open, but we took this 2-year, right? I'm thinking also my son at the time was 4. He probably thought, let me wait another year or two until he's a little bit more independent. And then there was another incident where he attacked me again. And same way, tried choking me out in 2019. And then that's where I got an email or a letter. I don't remember, but I did get notification that I had to appear for a preliminary hearing.
And so during the 2-year gap period, you were sort of trying to reconcile and nothing was really
Sort
happening in the
of.
court.
Yeah. I mean,
But then
honestly, I felt there was still,
it
the
wasn't
marriage
like it wasn't like you guys were actively pursuing the divorce. It was sort of in limbo. But then once this abuse happened again, that was sort of the final straw.
Yes. Yes. I believe he attacked me again to then say, okay, I'm going to proceed. Kind of like I don't even, we didn't even have time. I didn't even have time to talk to him about it when he attacked me again. And it was around like the end of February of 2019, March, beginning of March. And then I would say, and of course, he was definitely with this girl. So who knows if she was pressuring him, to leave. And soon after I received a notice, I believe it was in an email. I don't remember. I have to look back, but that I had to appear in April of 2019 for a preliminary hearing.
And that was in the Supreme Court in
Supreme Court.
Rockland.
Yep. Yes.
And is that when you showed
And
up with a lawyer?
um, yes, I did show up with an attorney, and there was talk that possibly we can mediate. That was my goal. I didn't want to make this any harder or more traumatizing for us and the children. But we tried that. We planned a schedule. But once finances were brought up, and I said, well, I don't know anything about the finances. I don't have access. I don't know I don't know anything. That's when he became angry. And then all of a sudden I got hit with a motion to punish me, to punish me, put me in a mental institution, that he's worried about my mental state. All of these accusations started to come up, that there needs to be a parenting schedule right away. And that's when the judge orders a nesting arrangement. I didn't know what that entailed. You have to understand too, at the time, my kids pretty much has never been alone with my ex. He had such a separate life. He was never involved or home with the children. So it was a big shock for them to quickly jump into this um, custody arrangement with a nesting. And basically with nesting is the children stay in the matrimonial home and you need to remove yourself. And so a couple hours, certain days out of the week, I'd have to leave for 4 hours where he can have time with the kids and vice versa. And then we would leave every other weekend. But it was hard for my children to not have me home because I was the one who put them to bed every single night, every night. And they were still young. So it was hard. There was no transitioning. There was nothing. And then with that, he would purposely not show up where we would have to switch and he would, come home because he would be out with his girlfriend and his girlfriend would want to stay with him longer. But then he would not show up. I used to have to take pictures showing like his car's not there. And then he would go to court and say that I wouldn't leave the house, that I was interfering with his parenting time. And so these were all false accusations, and I would have to constantly show proof that he never came back, he never showed up. But the judge wasn't accepting any of this. That's when I started realizing the judge was in on it as well, and the law clerk. The law clerk grew up here in Rockland, went to Nyack High School, graduated same year as my ex-husband, have mutual friends that are friends with my ex. So once I started learning all this, I said, wow, this is a conflict of interest. I didn't realize, and I know friends that got divorced, that were going through a divorce, that asked for a different venue because of how everyone knew each other and the connection and the conflicts of interest. But at that point, I was told, you can't do that. It's too late. You don't have enough evidence, but I started seeing that I think this judge is definitely in on this. So anything that I was showing, the proof and saying, no, this is not true, even my mental state, like I got evaluated 4 times. How many times do you need to be evaluated? to say, no, there is no mental illness. I'm not on any substance. I don't take any drugs. I don't do alcohol. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I'm not on any medications. Like, I'm not understanding, like, but my ex was using these typical tactics against me, false allegations to, you know, proceed with trying to get full custody. He also makes a lot of money. So he was worried about paying child support. That was something he asked the court that he would never have to do if it ever came to a 50-50 parenting time. He didn't want to pay child support. He didn't want to give one dime. And he figured, if I'm going to pay for these kids, it's going to be under my watch, my control. And I know my ex is a narcissist. For him to completely do everything he can to wipe me out of my children's lives, that person's mentally ill. That person is struggling with his own demons. Like, there is something wrong with that person to go to that extent. I get it. Relationships don't work out. There's a lot of hate. But what the best thing for the children are that both parents are involved in their children's lives. Now, granted, if there's abuse, then, obviously not. But that's the best therapy for the kids is seeing co-parenting. It's having both parents in their lives. You know what I'm saying?
Ideally, yes.
Yes.
Now, I want to share my screen for a second because I know that you had sent me a few pictures. So you can see my screen, right?
Yes, that is Shira Krantz. That must be her middle name, Ariel. She was the law clerk.
She was the law clerk, and she went to, what's the connection here?
That's the one that went to Nyack High School here in Rockland, graduated the same year as my ex-husband, and they're all friends. They all have mutual friends. That was the previous profile picture. I think when the article of the judge and her came out on my case, she had changed her profile picture to look more professional with that first picture you had showed on your screen. You had shared on your screen.
So she was the law clerk.
Yeah, she's no longer, after my case, and there was a similar case in Rockland County. The woman's name is Milena. Very, very similar. She was able to get Judge Eisenpress removed because she really showed the conflict of interest of the attorneys fundraising for the judge. That Veronica Young was one of the attorneys for the child, which was for my son. Now, this woman was definitely involved. I think maybe out of the 3 years, maybe of that she was an assigned attorney for my son, maybe spoke to my son for 1 minute. She did not communicate with my son at all. She only communicated with the opposing counsel, Kim Rayner, or my ex-husband. But she will not show her face. But over there, you can see Sherry Eisenpress or is that Kim Rayner? Let me see.
It looks like Sherry Eisenpress love reacted to her profile pic.
Yes. Yes.
So that shows that they are close enough that they're
there is
friends.
Communication on Facebook. Yes. There is one that she showed a picture. She showed a picture of Kim Rayner because this woman doesn't even have children. She has dogs as pets. That's the girlfriend and my ex-husband. So that is her profile picture.
That's
so
your ex-husband here?
That's his Kristen Benvenuto is the girlfriend, the live-in paramour.
And this
that's
is your
her
ex-husband?
profile on Instagram. Yeah. And that's my ex-husband right there. So when my ex-husband claims and says, no, I'm not in a relationship, I'm not sure. I don't know that I would think if someone's, and that's them together in a family photo back in 2000.
That's him and her.
20 or 21. They were in Florida visiting. That's his parents, Linda and John. Yep. And of course, those are my kids. So I blocked them out. But you can't tell me that, oh, no, this is not the live-in power. We're not in a relationship. I'm not replacing the mother. That is absolutely a lie. That's the judge with her partner. That is the judge, Eisenpress. That is Letitia James. Somehow there's definitely a connection with Letitia James, attorney Letitia James.
She
Made
was just freshly indicted yesterday, by the way.
Yes, and they're very close. She made numerous appearances here in Rockland County, and that's where the racketeering and the where the judge had a lot of connections, and unfortunately, Rockland County is not what it used to be, and a lot of corruption. That's the right. That's on the Pride Center. That is Eisenpress funds that organization. But that is Judge Andrea Composto, who was appointed, not elected, appointed.
This here.
Yep, and that's the Pride, and Judge Sherry Eisenpress is, showing that on her Pride Center Facebook. And but let me go back. That's Kim Rayner, the attorney for the child. But let me go back with this. So when I filed this year in the family court for modification, I filed a petition, as pro se litigant. Somehow I was assigned to this particular judge. There's many family court judges there, but somehow she took on the case, and of course is trying to dismiss and not, and prevent me from having access to filing in the court. And unfortunately, because of previous court orders that the judge placed, like gatekeepers and stayaways and all this stuff, it's prohibiting me from my rights to access the court and litigate. My children have rights, and my daughter's 16. My daughter's going to be 17.
And so say one more time, who is Kim Rayner again?
That's the opposing counsel. She's the one who represents, but notice how there's a rainbow around her face because she's promoting, they're all Judge Eisenpress. And as you can see, I don't think I gave you a picture, but there's been times where she's commented on Judge Sherry Eisenpress's Facebook posts. So you can see where they're all friends.
And it almost seems like there's a lot of a political agenda, with a lot of the stuff with the pride and the things like that, where maybe.
And I have nothing against that, but you see where I'm sure Kim Rayner donates, right? And so they feel, well, then I need to when you want to win a case, I'll help you out. And this is where the corruption happens. I'm just little old me trying to get divorced, trying to be a parent to my kids and move on with my life and have a loving, happy, wonderful life with my children and try to co-parent. But that's not the case, and this is where the corruption happens. And so because they have personal, relations, everyone, and they're donating, it's all about money and everyone's donating to each other. In fact, if you look, and I think now, but back in 2019 or 2020, if you look back at all the donations that Judge Eisenpress was accepting, there was a point where, because she was being so exposed, there was a point where it showed she was donating to herself. She wouldn't show who was donating to her. So when an attorney donates to a judge, they're not allowed to be litigating a case in front of that judge for 2 years. So people started to educate themselves and realize that. So when they would say, hey, this is a conflict of interest, they had to hide that. So then you would notice then these donations were donated by her. She wouldn't show who was giving her the money.
So she was donating to herself?
Yes. Yes. That's what it was showing on the, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about fraud.
Yes. Yes.
So now I want to ask you, so obviously you mentioned like after things went south between you and your husband, he seemingly tried to financially cripple you or bankrupt you or make it so you were in a position where you couldn't access the necessary funds to get a lawyer or whatever it is that you had to do. Did the court try to use that against you as a weapon, besides the mental health stuff, where they try to have you do evaluations? Did they try to say that because you couldn't provide or didn't expect you to be able to provide for the kids, that somehow that you weren't going to be fit?
No. So the way my ex-husband did it was, they were trying to use mental illness, right? I wasn't stable. But then what my ex was doing was he was slowly giving me money in increments. So whatever he provided, say the savings accounts. So then he would say, okay, we would split the savings account. And then I would get that lump sum of money. And then I was slammed with court orders. You need to pay half of the attorneys. You need to pay half for private, for the, for your private therapist. You need to pay for the family therapist. You need to pay for the parent coordinator. You need to start paying for your own attorney. And that money would just go quickly. And then he would say, okay, I'll give her money. I have stocks and bonds, and I'll give her money that way. And it was done in increments. It wasn't done like first cuts, you know what I'm saying? And then I was court ordered to pay for my attorneys. I was court ordered to pay for supervised visits. I was court ordered, and that's how that money went quickly. And that's how he was doing it. With that, there was a point where James Sexton, attorney here in Rockland, stole money out of my escrow account, because then I was forced to be taken out of the home, matrimonial home, and then my ex bought me out. It was put in an escrow account, and then with that's when James Sexton, I don't know, I guess there was ex parte communication with the opposing counsel, Kim Rayner, and the judge, and without my knowledge, took my money within a 1 month representation. He took $135,000 in 1 month.
He was
He
your
was
lawyer.
my attorney. So you see how the racketeering was happening, that even attorneys I was retaining on my behalf, who were representing me on my behalf, were working against me.
And it's almost like every time, like you said, every time you got a piece of your share of an asset,
I was court ordered to spend it all.
Spend it all back on the court.
Within the 6 months, not even 4 months. And it would be like, say, 120,000. It was gone. It was gone. You have to understand, it was during a pandemic, and I still wasn't working because I didn't work for 13 years. I had to figure out even just a place to stay. He took the car away. He took everything away. I had to temporarily live with my parents. Thankfully, they live locally, not far, just to have a roof over my head and just kind of figure out, my situation, work. I had to try to go back to work, and that, I had to get it takes time. I didn't work for 13 years. That was a big question that they asked, like, how come you didn't work for 13 years? I was home with my children, raising them. And so when all of this was happening, it was happening so fast that I still wasn't working. And then it got to a point where he coordinated something with the Veronica Young, the attorney for my son. Basically, I was entitled to alimony, which was shortened. I think I was entitled to a 4-year. I think he made it to 2.5 years. I was entitled for some alimony, but with that, what my ex-husband did was he asked the judge and Shira Krantz, the law clerk, to basically say, okay, she owes this amount. Well, I'm going to pay it. I'm going to pay the attorney and instead of giving my alimony to me, he's going to pay her off with my alimony.
Which is unbelievable, because
I had a year left of alimony, and that was money I relied on, because I was still, just starting to work. Wasn't making that much money. And he took that alimony and made the arrangement with the judge and the attorney for the child, Ronnie Young, that he would pay her off of the amount of, say, $12,000 or more. I think it was $15,000. And he would take my alimony away from me, my entitled alimony, and give it to her.
That's ridiculous. And
these were things that were just happening in my case. When he gave me the stocks and bonds, it was a good amount of stocks and bonds, but I had to sell all that. I was told I'm going to get hit with capital gains. Be careful. I'm going to get hit with a lot at the end of the year. And sure enough, that's what happened. So those stocks and bonds that I sold to pay off these court order, right? These court
So
order,
they ordered you to sell those, right? They ordered you to sell
I
the stocks.
basically had to because I had no money because I was court ordered to pay this crazy amount of money to everyone. And I was told if I don't, they're going to put me in jail. And
Wow.
so I then quickly sold it. And at the time, I was told in order for my children to ever have overnights or for me to have any kind of relationship, I would have to provide them a 3-bedroom home within the school district. Now, remind you, Rockland's big. There's many districts, school districts. I had to, that's how precise they were. 3 bedrooms, a home in the school district that they go to. Now, remind you, now I'm trying to figure out, I didn't work for all these years. How am I going to get approved for a mortgage? How am I going to get approved? I didn't even know. I swear God was watching over me because somehow he helped me and got me through it. And once I was able to accomplish that, which I was shocked myself when I presented it to the court and say, okay, here, I have, this is for my kids. I did it for my kids. I didn't do it for myself. They said, oh, we see where your priorities are. And then they retaliated and say, that's when the default order protections came about. That's when I was being threatened to be put in jail. That's when I was being threatened. I was going to I should be put in a mental institution for 90 days. I mean, these were the things that I developed PTSD. So when I asked for ADA rights, I said, listen, I'm afraid to even go in front of this. Every time I walk into her courthouse, I'm being yelled at, like literally threatened that I'm going to go to jail. And that was denied, my ADA rights, because the judge didn't think I had PTSD. She didn't think I needed these ADA accommodations.
And this is Eisenpress the whole
Yes,
time?
yes, yes. She thinks that I was making this all up.
Which violates federal law because the judges should not even be the ones ruling on these ADA accommodations. They're supposed to have a designated person and department to deal with that. So when they give it to these judges, it creates bias because they're ruling on your case.
Correct.
And they shouldn't be looking at your private medical information like that. So
I did have a therapist evaluate me, and I did. You're right. You don't have to provide all of that information, but I did. And still, in fact, they retaliated on the therapist, who's a therapist that mainly deals with narcissistic abuse. And my ex-husband and his attorney went after her to try to get her license removed because he didn't like what he read, that I was dealing with narcissistic abuse. It was obvious. And my ex-husband didn't like that. So what did he do? He retaliated on her and attacked her. What does that tell you about his character?
sounds like he's
He went
dangerous.
after my therapist and filed a complaint, and nothing came out of it, but that's what he did.
So now, I know you mentioned in the beginning, it was where you guys were sharing the matrimonial home and both kind of rotating in the home to still spend time with the kids. And then you mentioned it got to being, there was supervised visits at one point, and then there was orders of protection. So how did it escalate from, how did you find that it escalated from you having access to supervised to nothing?
Basically, the way it happened was we were doing the nesting. He kept claiming that there was interference, which was not true. I always took the kids away. We went away a lot. We did a lot of road trips. My ex would be doing his thing. He never came to any of the trips. When he did, it was always a fight. He was always fighting. And so the kids actually preferred him not being around when we would take these family trips, but he was always invited. So throughout this, we were doing vacations separately, obviously. And of course, I was entitled for my vacations. He was entitled to his. And so when what triggered him was when I decided to take the kids to Florida, and we drove, and I drove with my cousin. That's when he got the forensic evaluator involved, where he asked that I was mentally ill. And then with that, this Mark Mednick was appointed. And right around the time his report was just finished in August, he tried taking the kids away with his girlfriend, okay? Knowing that and my daughter didn't want to go. My son was still young. He didn't get it. My daughter was old enough. She didn't want to go. She was afraid for her safety because there was always drinking. There was always unsupervised. They were always unsupervised, the children. There was always like smoke. It was very, just very, not a good environment for the kids. And with that, he claimed I was interfering again. And I go to court for a hearing on September 3rd of 2020. And that's when all of a sudden the judge says, you can't go back to your house. And you're going to be under supervised visits. And you can only see your kids 6 hours a week. These are the days, this is the time you can see them, and it needs to be supervised. And you need to figure out how you're going to pay for it.
And what did your lawyer
And then
say?
from then on, it just started getting worse. The order of protections, my ex kept asking for extensions. And then it got to the point where these supervised visits almost felt like they were becoming permanent. These supervisors, I have over 100 reports. I went through 8 different supervisors because they weren't good enough. Apparently, they would talk about negative things about the father and things that the children were sharing with me. And he was caught drinking and driving recklessly, literally by a private investigator on video. Okay. This is a man that was just thought he can do whatever he wanted because he knew he had this judge to help him, right, and protect him. And so it was like a free for all. And with all that, he would get angry. He would say, Your Honor, we need to extend the supervised visits and we need a new supervisor. I went through 8. All good reports on my end, some negative on the father. And that's just how it just kept escalating. And it just kept being extended and extended and extended. And then it got to a point where once we were divorced and I was still trying to, the kids wanted to see me, I wanted to see them. He gets a default order of protection. I was never notified about this hearing. It was not put in NYSIF because I have access to NYSIF because I was a pro se litigant. I never got anything in the mail, nothing. There was a hearing without me there and puts a 2-year default order protection, where that's when my ex started dangling it over. I guess I didn't know about this, but then I worked in the school district as a teacher assistant. And you know how many times he tried getting me fired? I mean, he was trying to even sabotage my job, like everything I did to anything I achieved or anything to better myself. He was still, after the marriage, was still trying to use this judge to place these, unnecessary fraudulent order protections or whatever she did behind the scenes. What I did notice was a few of us in the community, in the county, got together and we filed numerous complaints about the judge in the judicial committee. Finally, she was under investigations again back in April of 2024. And you know what they did? Instead of her being censured, they just transferred her out of Rockland County. And now she's at Goshen, Supreme Court, Goshen, New York, upstate, a little more upstate from me. That's what they did. They shuffled everything under the rug. Let's not. We'll just move her out. We'll just get her out. She's causing too much chaos here in Rockland. Everyone's catching on. That sort of freed me in a way from this judge, because as long as she was here in Rockland County, now she lives in Rockland, So she's still doing her thing behind the scenes. Don't get me wrong. Don't think she's calling up these judges and making her requests or whatever she's doing behind the scenes. She's absolutely doing that. But it didn't allow her specifically to do all these horrible things to me. I mean, she would send sheriffs and police officers. One time there must have been like 3 sheriffs and 2 police officers. Like, I wasn't home at the time, but I could see it on my ring, banging on my door, that I could hear my neighbor next to her saying, "Is everything okay? Like, what's going on?" People were like, what the hell's going on? Normally when you see that, you think like, oh my God, is there like something happened, a crime happened? Like, what happened? She was like harassing me in that way. She was using law enforcement to harass me. And so was my ex. I had to write to the county executive, Ed Day. I wrote a letter to him and I said, there's children playing outside. I know everyone in the neighborhood. This is Rockland County. How are you allowing this judge and my ex-husband to do this? This is not right. It's not fair for the people in the community.
Yeah, and it's like you don't feel safe because then when you need to call the police for something,
Oh,
they
yeah,
already have this
you're right.
bias against you.
Exactly.
And
There was a point where I was like afraid every time I saw a police officer, because a lot of police officers walk through the schools. Every time I in the beginning, I used to get triggered. And thankfully, now that things have calmed down, I don't, it's not as, the PTSD is not as, severe, but there was a point where, yeah, I was scared. I used to leave my lights. I used to shut all my lights in my house. I didn't want anyone to know if I was home or not.
yeah, it's like nerve wracking. And, before when you were mentioning what happened when you guys came back to court after those 2 trips you took, and then all of a sudden the judge just starts issuing all these crazy orders.
Yes, a forensic
It's like,
evaluator, that she's crazy, she's mentally. I just got back from Florida. This was right before COVID hit in March. I got back at the end of February. It was February break. I couldn't have been that crazy that I drove. We drove to Florida with my 2 kids by myself. Oh, yes, I met my cousin, but we didn't drive in the same car. We wouldn't drive together. I'm capable of, doing all that, but yet I was mentally ill. I was crazy. I'm not stable.
well,
Yeah,
it's not even that. Like, you had a private attorney. That's like kind of where I was getting at, is that you are going to court with an attorney that you pay a lot of money for. And what is your attorney doing when all of this is happening? Why isn't your attorney protecting you, defending you, standing on your rights? They're standing there like a statue collecting a check, but when the judge goes
right.
and violates your rights, they're silent.
But just so you know, I forgot to mention this part. I had to go through a few attorneys. There were some attorneys that asked to be removed off the case. Some, like that guy, James Sexton, who stole my money out of my escrow account. Of course, I had to get him removed. So some I had asked for them to remove themselves. But what was happening was, with the few that were defending me, the judge would sanction them and ask to pay my ex-husband his legal fees.
That's the other thing. If
How
your
do you think an
ex-husband,
attorney is going to want to represent me? They see the judge is retaliating on them. So no
Yeah.
one's going to want to take my case. Unless they go and follow their orders on what to do in my case and go and work against me, that was the only way they were able to get paid, or the judge won't retaliate, And so I was pretty much like blacklisted. I was like a victim of this. And it was so unfortunate. And so that's when I then educated myself on litigating pro se. And that was a disadvantage because the judge wasn't accommodating me on being a pro se litigant. And that gave the judge the upper hand to retaliate even more, because it's my word against her now. It's not like me and an attorney's word against her saying, no, you're wrong, you're not following the law. Now it's my word against this judge. So that was such a big disadvantage. But at that point, I was fighting for my life. I was like, it's either that or I just, leave and disappear. But I mean, I do believe that my ex was hoping that I would kill myself or I would disappear or something bad would happen to me. But all I kept thinking are my children. I'm never going to give up on my kids. I love them too much. And they love me and they want me in their life. No matter what my ex does, or, like, he knows it. It kills it. He hates it. He retaliates and you know, abuses my kids because they love me and they want to be in my life, and that's sad. You know, it's really sad that I feel more guilty and I feel bad for them. I'm hurting because they're hurting. Like, I'm a big girl. I can deal with it, right? Like, we could deal with all this. I have tough skin now, but it's your children. And my ex knew the only thing he can use to weaponize me were my children. He knew I was willing to walk away from the car, the house, I don't know, these nonsense. He would go to these country clubs because he was a big golfer and tennis. I didn't care about any of that. I was never lavished with gifts. I wasn't, no, it was pure, it was abuse. I was willing to walk away from everything except for my kids. And
And
he
it's
knew that
sad.
was the only thing he had on me were the children.
Yeah, it's so sad. And like a lot of these narcissistic men, they really are not capable of love. They can't love their children. They can't love their wife. And it's just all about control, power, and looking at you and the kids like a possession. Like he
Yes.
owns the kids. He owns you.
Yes.
And it's
He
like, oh, you're
claims
not gonna
them every year. There was a time where I was living in the home half the year, and half the year that was when I was, and he claimed me. He forged my signature. The accountant, Mike Profena, allowed all this. This is one of his family friends. His mother is my ex-husband's mother and Mike Profena's mother are very, very close friends. In fact, there was incidents where she got involved and started saying false allegations about me. But he allowed to forge my signature and claim me for the full year. And then I was entitled to, right? That year that I was still living in the home, I was entitled to some of that money, right? That he claimed on me. I never saw that money. My ex-husband just kept it. You're talking about a guy who makes millions of dollars and he wouldn't give me what? Two, three
well, like you
thousand,
said, from
3,000, like what, that's nothing. Yeah,
yeah,
so
like you
he
said, from
forged
day
my
one.
signature, forged my signature.
Yeah, and then it's like from the very start, he was trying to control you financially and use that as a weapon. And then
Mhm.
afterwards, it's like, why were you having to pay any of his attorney's fees? I've never heard of a situation where a stay-at-home mom wife has to pay the breadwinner husband's legal fees. Usually it's the other way around where he pays her legal fees, or
Yes.
if there was a contempt and somebody had to get dragged back to court because of a contempt, then they can ask for legal fees, but not it's not like you just have the right to get half or all. And the fact that they forced you to liquidate assets and pay for things out of your settlement is ridiculous. It almost seems like a lot of these attorneys and the judges were all kind of getting paid off or in on it, especially if he went straight to the Supreme Court knowing this particular judge was there. And then you mentioned all the other connections. So it definitely seems like racketeering where they forgery, fraud, wire fraud,
Yeah,
extortion,
fraudulent order protections, ways of trying to
everything.
get me arrested, trying to see. But with we were talking about I'm sorry, now I forgot what we were talking about. I wanted to say something, but
It's okay. Well, so now how long has it been since you've seen your children?
so the last time I had unsupervised, okay, unsupervised, and that pissed my ex-husband off, and that's when he filed a motion for contempt, even though they never found me in contempt. Was September, I think it was like September 10th or 11th of 2020. I mean, I'm sorry, 2021. 2021.
Wow. So it's been over 4 years.
Yes. And then I tried to appeal it. The appellate court was not, they were doing everything to try to dismiss my appeal. I never had the opportunity to file my brief. I paid all this money trying to, as I was, because I was litigating as pro se. They made it very, very difficult. So that appeal never went through. And then when I tried to file back in court for my rights, that's when the judge continued to retaliate and would put these gatekeepers and default order protections and all of these other things. There was a point where my daughter, she sent letters, she wrote letters to the judge, that the judge ignored it. There was text thread that I was on between my daughter's attorney, Nicole Greenwald, and my daughter, begging her, like, you need to do something, please help me. I want those were all ignored and dismissed. There was a point where my daughter was like, twice this happened. Once was in a report that somehow was missing. That report was never filed in the court documents, that she wanted to kill herself because of what my ex is doing. And then the second time was in 2022. Again, that got dismissed. Now I'm seeing things on social media. I believe my ex is prostituting my daughter. If you see what she's wearing, she's never home on the weekends. That's what it seems. I don't know where her whereabouts are. I don't even know if she's here in the state. For all I know, he could have sent her down to Florida with my in-laws. I don't know. I don't know if my children are safe. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, occasionally I'll get a text here and there from the pediatrician because he's trying to get that. He won't pay, because apparently they're trying to collect money that he won't pay these very small co-pays. So that's a way of his tactic to get me, all upset. Those are the only things I get. I get, maybe there's a doctor's fee that was never paid. Other than that, I have no idea. So when I kept saying this is parental alienation, this is parental custodial interference, I have the right. He's trying to hide it and act like, no, he's not. He's not, preventing the children from seeing their mother. But yet there's a horrible, abusive woman who's bulimic that he brought into the home to replace me as a mother, who has other mental illness and who takes drugs and prescription medication. And yet I'm not good enough. I'm not a good parent. The children should not have a relationship with their biological mother. But all these other people is accepted, and for them to be around or for them to be raised by.
That's terrible. And I'm so sorry. And the fact that he had to resort to default orders of protection and ex partes and all of this fraud just to try to protect some assets and protect some money, when in reality, you
And
probably
it's
wouldn't have even
retaliation.
cared.
It's
And it's not even
retaliation on
like,
me. He wants to
yeah, and
punish me. He's
and
angry.
it's not even like you were going out trying to get all his money. You just wanted to have your children be safe.
That's it. That's it. Just continue my life. Continue
Yes.
as a single mom, enjoying my children, enjoying my life and being able to, move on. That's all I wanted. I didn't want anything else. Obviously, I was entitled to things in the marriage, and I needed that. I needed something. I wasn't asking for all. I needed something to get back on my feet. I did stop working for 13 years. And my devotion was caring for the children. So I wasn't, but yet he couldn't, he's such a narcissist that he had to blame me. His mother didn't want us together. She was manipulating him, putting thoughts in his head. And, I was the bad guy. He had to punish me. He had to wipe me out, like he had to get rid of me. And I'm still here. I'm not leaving. I'm not gonna, I will continue to advocate for my children. And I hope this video, they'll one day see it and
Yeah.
know that this was not my decision. This was not my doing, and that I am going to continue to advocate for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, don't ever think that anybody can ever replace you as a mother, because no matter what, no one will ever replace
No, right.
you. You're always going to be their mother. And as you said, your kids are getting older. Pretty soon they're going to be aged out, and they'll be able to be away from his, control, and they can choose to come to you and not to have to be restricted like this. And I think it's absolutely horrific that any mother will go 4 to 5 years with no contact, no visits, absolutely nothing, all the birthdays, all the holidays, everything.
So one thing I forgot to mention about narcissistic abuse is that the narcissist will also manipulate your family, whether it's your parents, your sisters, cousins, just your family, your extended family. And that happened while we were married. I didn't know, like, he was already manipulating, right, brainwashing my family. So when I was going through the divorce proceeding and all this stuff was happening, I didn't have that support. In fact, they believed him over me. Thankfully now, as years passed by and they started seeing his true colors and started really seeing what he's all about and what he did, I have a good relationship with my family. But there was a time where during my marriage, there was even an inappropriate close relationship between my ex-husband and my sister that I didn't even know about. I later found out, again, a lot of stuff came out during my divorce proceeding, and people would say, like, oh, oh yeah, I used to see your sister and your ex-husband at a local bar. I thought you knew. Like, people knew, but people never addressed or approached me about these things. So there was a lot of things that were happening behind my back while I was so focused on, and he was putting that burden on, taking care of the kids. There was all of this other stuff that was happening behind my back, the manipulation. There was during the divorce, there were things that I wanted, I had that were sentimental in the home, and my attorney at the time was trying to get the court to allow me to just, access the home and retrieve my personal items, sentimental items. And the judge would say, okay, you have 24 hours or 48 hours to retrieve them. And then my attorney and I would try to negotiate a time to retrieve these items, with my ex-husband and his attorney. And then they would sort of prolong it, right? They would, sort of not, be cooperative. They wouldn't coordinate. And then we would go back to the court and say, hey, I wasn't able to retrieve my items. And the judge would say, oh, too bad, it's too late now. I mean, these were things that were happening. And then later on, my daughter would tell me, hey, dad threw this out, dad threw that out, and I remember getting upset because my ex knew I was that type of person. I really cherished sentimental items. I had things that were very sentimental to me, but during the healing process, I had to understand that these are just stuff. I'll always have my memories of wonderful things, during my childhood or with my children. And I knew I just had to move on, and not dwell, because you can't heal if you just constantly dwell on these things. And, so you have to be able to let go. So, it's hard, but, we have to understand that these are just things that, we have to learn how to cope with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like how they say betrayal never comes from your enemies. And that's what makes it hurt so much, because the people that are supposed to be loyal and be there for you in the hardest times are usually the ones that aren't there, and especially family. And I've learned that blood is not thicker than water. There's some people who are strangers that have shown more kindness than some of my family. So I
Right.
can understand how you feel, especially when everybody's seems to know what's going on except you. It's like the whole family knows what's going on, but they're keeping secrets and being shady and manipulative. And when these court things happen, it's like people are prone to take sides, and then it's like they forget all their relationship with you, all their bond with you. And these narcissists can a lot of times easily manipulate your friends and family, and that's what they love to do. They love to turn people against you.
There was actually, I knew my ex was communicating with the law clerk and possibly even directly to the judge, or at least the attorney was, because I remember there was a time we were at a court hearing and I retained a new attorney and the judge was trying to start a trial and the attorney was like, no, you can't do that. And then she got so annoyed and she said, counsel, I want you and your, I want, like, she pointed to me, like, I want you and her to come in the back with me in chambers. And I'll never forget it. I walk back there. And at first I was like, do I go back there? Do I not? Like, what, or this, like, am I supposed to follow? Like, I found it very odd because obviously I knew it wasn't going to be documented. The stenographer had, stopped recording. So I remember walking back there with my attorney and, we sat down. There was two bailiffs right behind her where she was sitting, and they were kind of like, one was a female, one was a male, and they have their hand like as if I'm 4'11", so I don't know if I'm intimidating them or not. I mean, this woman's this judge is huge, and I sat down, and she goes, "I think you're crazy. I think you're mentally ill," and I look at her and I go. And then she goes, doesn't your family think you're crazy? Doesn't your family think you're crazy? And I go, who told you that? Did my ex Jay tell you this? I said, where are you getting this information? That's absolutely not true. And how dare you? I wanted to say, at first I like stopped myself, but I wanted to say, how dare you talk to me like this? Like, what, this is like an interrogation. And I was so shocked. And then I looked at my counsel and I said, my attorney, and I was like, is this even allowed? Am I really sitting here? Is this really happening? I mean, she was doing things so inappropriately. It was like she took the case so personal. And that's the number one thing. A judge can never they have to be very impartial, very unbiased. I mean, there were things that were being told to her that someone would have had to say something for her to say something like that to me. Doesn't your family think you're crazy? That means you were talking to someone.
Yeah,
who are you talking to?
Immediately recused to make a statement like that.
100%, but she did it in chambers. She didn't do it out in the courtroom, like, where there would be maybe court watchers, right? Other witnesses. It was in closed doors. There was a time, and I have to bring this up, and I'm sure my children to this day will never forget because they were traumatized. There was a time where she brought my kids in open court and she wanted to continue the hearing. So she brought my children, my two little children. At the time, my daughter was 11. I think my son was like 7, and 7 or 8. And she locked them in that room in chambers. She locked them by themselves. And as she was talking, you can hear my son, because my daughter ended up telling me it was my son, trying to get out. He was having like a panic attack. He was scared. He was like, what are we doing? Now, they're young. They're in a room that they're not familiar with. The door was locked. They were locked in there. And you could
Was
see.
there a minors counsel?
Huh?
Did
What?
they have like a minors
Yes.
counsel with them?
They had an AFC. The AFCs were in the courtroom with us. But you could hear the banging. And she goes, what? And the judge like, what is that? Is that them trying to get out? Like as if this was like a joke. I was like, how dare you? Like, how could you be like, these poor children are traumatized. They weren't in there with their counsel. They weren't in there with like a bailiff or someone. No one. They were by themselves.
So their counsel was in the courtroom and
Yes,
they were
the
alone
two
in the
counsels
chambers?
were in the courtroom while the judge was yapping her mouth. I don't even remember what she was saying that day, because they were so that day was like the worst day because it was so inappropriate, and all I kept thinking were about my children. Like how like what are they thinking right now? Oh my God, are they being traumatized? I remember my son, I later on saw him. And remind you, my visits at the time were supervised. So there were supervisors there. They were listening to everything. My son said, "Mommy, why is the judge so mean? I don't like this judge. She's so mean. Why is she doing this to us?"
That's terrible.
And that's when my daughter started writing letters to the judge. Was like, "Please, what are you doing? Like, help us. Like, why are you doing this to us? Our moms never hurt us. Like, never. I've never touched them. I've never neglected them. There was never, ever, ever, ever any, a, reports of abuse or neglect or anything. No substance abuse, nothing. If anything, I was their primary caregiver. Like that was it. They only really knew me because my ex was doing his thing, was, building his career, was going on business trips, was going on trips. I found out later he was on these business trips. He was taking his girlfriend, Kristen, that he was with at the time. While I was home, he never left money. I always had to call my dad or my mom, mostly my dad, say, "Hey, I don't have any cash. Can you give me $20? My daughter wants to buy lunch today at school." I mean, these were the things that were happening. And I'm thinking to myself, this is when I was like, is this how marriage is supposed to be? Like, is this how it's supposed to be? Because this doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem right. This feels like abuse. And once I started speaking up, questioning things, that's when my ex was like, "Oh crap, she's picking on." Like she's like she knows like what's going on. Like now, I guess that's when he was like, now I need to do something about this.
Yeah. And so just to be clear, that day when your children were in chambers, was the judge in chambers with them?
No,
So they were by themselves?
they were by them. No, the judge told the bailiffs to direct them back in the back chambers. And then they closed the door, they locked it. The bailiffs come back out in the open courtroom. The AFCs, my attorney, we were all in the courtroom as the judge continued the hearing. My children were in the back.
With no adult, with
No
zero
adult,
present.
no adult, no supervision, no one.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
Because she wanted to continue the hearing. And obviously she knew they shouldn't be there while the hearing continued. Now, why did she bring my kids in the courtroom to begin with and ask for them? It was because she thought she would scare them and tell them directly, "Blame it on me. This is not your father's fault. Blame it on me. I'm telling you, you can't be with your mother. I'm telling you this. You are not to blame your father. Blame it on me." She got to a point where she was going to put herself in that situation where I don't know how much he was paying her to say this, because I was even shocked that she was protecting him, my ex-husband, the abuser, and said, "Oh, bring them in the courtroom. I'll tell them that I'm going to tell them that this is my decision. This is what I want for you. And I don't care how you feel." And I remember my son raising his hand and saying, and she goes, "Yeah," like this. And he goes, "When can I live with my mommy?" She goes, "No."
Are you
Just like
serious?
that. And my son was 7. God, you got to love him to have that courage to even he raised his hand as if like he's in class, raised his hand and said, and she goes, "Yeah." And she was so nasty to him. "When can I live with my mommy?"
That's terrible.
I mean, I want to cry because I'll never forget that day. And I remember his face. He was like, and that night I remember I had a visit with them. And that's when he said, this judge is mean. I don't like this judge. Why is she so mean? There was a conversation. Now, remind you, he's 8. And I couldn't believe he even like brought this up, but there was a conversation where he said, I was joking around with him and he was hugging me and I was sitting with him and he said, Mommy, when I get married and have kids, will the kids live with me? And I said, absolutely. I said, and I'm going to live right next door. And he was laughing. He thought it was the funniest thing. And I said, how does an 8-year-old even ask that kind of question? Because he knew, like, doesn't seem right. My mom did nothing wrong. Why is this happening? Why is the judge bringing us in court? I mean, this was so traumatizing for little children to have to experience this, and I get they say children are resilient, we're all resilient, but it doesn't mean it's not going to follow them and not the trauma you know, won't come back later in life because it does. You'll get somehow, throughout your trauma, like you'll be triggered. Like, yeah, this can affect them as they get older. Absolutely. I don't care how resilient they are. It is going to affect them as they get older. Was this really necessary? Did they really have to go through this? Did they have to be put in this situation? No, they didn't. And how my ex-husband allowed this and not say, hey, Your Honor, this is too much. I can't do this. Because in the end, it was all about, I didn't want it. They knew I didn't want it. But it was on him. It was all on him. If he made that decision and say, Your Honor, this doesn't seem right. I don't want this for my kids. I don't want this. They should have their mother-in-law. This would have never happened. But he obviously, my children were blaming him because they knew he could have said, no, we're not doing this. Your Honor, this is not right. Why are they in the back? Get them out from the back. This was stuff that they knew he had control over. So that's why they were trying to tell the children, like, trying to convince them, but it was so hard to convince them because they knew this was all because of their father putting all of us in this situation. They knew that. They're very smart. Children are smart. I don't care what, So, I'm sorry. So and each time the children would ask for me and not believe and not, believe what the judge was saying or believe him, I would get they would retaliate on me and then I would be punished. And then more time was taken away. More restrictions were against me. More court orders were against me. I was being retaliated on. So, and then they would say, this is all your fault. As if they couldn't, no matter what they did to try to convince the kids to say, no, hate your mother, love your father only, and you can only live with him. I was being punished for it.
I'm just shocked that they would directly involve the children in the litigation, especially at such a young age. Like, I've heard of times where people will say that the judge will have the children come
In camera.
in chambers,
Yeah.
where they'll interview the children, speak to them in chambers, and then they'll go back and report to the court what was said. I've never ever heard of a judge literally having the children in the courtroom and then locking them in the room by themselves.
Exactly.
It is like child abuse. Every single person needs to be investigated that was there.
100%. And I reported it.
Unacceptable.
I reported this to the Judicial Committee. There was a time, because I told you, she brought my kids in a few times, not once, at least 3 or 4 times. And every time I would ask for a transcript when the children were present in the courtroom. Apparently they didn't have that transcript. They weren't able to provide that transcript because there were children involved, even though it wasn't
your children.
Right, but even though it wasn't in camera, it was part of a hearing. So that's not my problem that, because they're minors, you can't provide me the transcript. I'm sorry that then it should have been in cameras. But there was a time where I had an attorney. They brought us in because my ex was trying to remove FaceTime because at the time the girlfriend was coming around, was staying there, was in the home. And so it was an inconvenience for my ex-husband because he was going down the street, to drink and party during, during school days, during the week. And it was an inconvenience because we would have a certain time, like 8 o'clock, right around the time where they should be getting ready to go to bed, right? No, they were down the street at neighbors' houses drinking. And it was an inconvenience to bring them back to the house, talk to me for a half hour or whatever. Half the time my children did not want to get off the phone. So he was trying to remove FaceTime. And so I remember them bringing the kids back in the courtroom, trying to, switch these FaceTimes to Zoom, all these like crazy things. And I remember, okay, the hearing was done. My children were still in the courtroom. And I'm standing there next to my daughter. She's hugging me. And she witnessed, and I witnessed, we both witnessed at the same time, my ex-husband's attorney, Kim Rayner, whispering in the judge's ear, whispering.
What?
Whispering. And my daughter goes, Mommy, why is Daddy's attorney whispering in the judge's ear? What are they saying?
Oh
And
my
I
God.
said, oh my God. I mean, do they really think that they could, because they knew they can get away with this type of behavior.
And
But
where's
my
the
daughter
stenographer?
witnessed it. And I remember saying something to my attorney, and she's like, well, like she didn't even know what to do or what to say because she already saw how this judge was treating me, and so she was trying to she didn't want to be retaliated against. So she just kind of was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, just kind of like, okay, I don't know. I don't think there's anything we can do.
So question for you. Like in Connecticut, there's always a stenographer present, and they're always recording or supposed to be recording the audio, and
We
the
don't have
stenographer is
audio.
supposed to be typing it the whole time. So in New York, you're saying there's no audio ever?
No, there is in New York. I've court watched in Staten Island. I've court watched in New Jersey because I'm, I'm on the border of New Jersey, so I court watch a lot. They do have audio. It's Rockland County that does
So
it
each
because these stenographers can tamper, not just the stenographers, the judges and the law clerks can tamper with this whatever the stenographers are documenting. Also, it's not accurate. There's so many times I would have to pay for these transcripts. That's another thing. They make a lot of money. I have to find out who's the stenographer, contact them, and privately pay them for my transcript. And if I want this transcript within a week or two, I have to pay double. Okay, the fee's higher. So and you're talking about a couple $100, maybe even $1,000 per transcript. But no, they are not recorded, at least in matrimonial Supreme Court cases. It's a stenographer, they're typing. Most of the time as you're reading, you can see there's certain things missing as if they didn't quite get, everything. And so I don't know how accurate you can say these transcripts are, but also it gives the opportunity and the ability for a judge or a law clerk to take away certain things that were said in the courtroom. And that's why I highly encourage court watchers and take notes. And I always take notes. So if that litigant wants, any notes that I took, if they ask, they're available. Very important because, they tell you can't record. They tell you, and they do that for a reason. They're trying to hide their,
Yeah, and that's a red flag
conduct.
because if you don't have an audio to compare the PDF typed transcript to, then how can you verify that it was correct? If you're saying to them that there's a mistake, they can just be like, no, there's no mistake, and then there's no recording to verify that. So that's a red flag. And the fact that are you saying that different counties have different rules? Like certain counties do record?
I don't know. What I've observed, again, I court watch. I've gone to Staten Island Family Court. I've seen them record it. Like it's recorded. It's being recorded. It's on audio. Just what I've observed. But here in Rockland, no, it's a person, it's a human, it's a stenographer. She's typing away. I know for a fact that they've been tampered because certain things that would be so important for me to have as evidence in these transcripts are missing. And I know they were said. Like there was a point where the judge, it was supposed to be an agreement of a 50-50 joint legal, and my ex didn't like that, right? Once we figured, once we dissolved the divorce, right? Once we were done, he refiled a contempt motion because he wanted to get the full custody, right? I was never found and I was never put in contempt. But with that, I remember his counsel said, Your Honor, if this was ever a 50-50, Mr. Stample should not have to pay child support. And they were waiting for her to say, okay, I'll grant that for you. But at that point, she was like, can't answer that question right now. But that statement was not in that transcript. So I know it's being tampered with. You would see a lot of little like dash, 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 missing words. I don't know how I'm supposed to appeal something when that's not in the transcript. Because when you appeal, it's based on transcripts. It's not, you give them the transcripts, you tell them what happened, it shows what happened. But if it's not in the transcript, how am I supposed to appeal?
So what do you do? Do they have a process where you ask the court reporter to fix it? Have you ever?
No.
They just say, this is it. And that's
it. This is it.
Yeah. And also I think it's probably unconstitutional that, different counties in the same state have such a significantly different rules, like to not have audio in one county, but you have it in the other. That's a huge disadvantage. And I feel like there should be uniform rules across the board, like in other states where every court in the whole entire state has the same thing. And
yes,
it shouldn't be like, oh, matrimonial court has a stenographer and civil court doesn't. Like it should be every single court should have recording and a stenographer present.
But this is it. This is what's alarming is that even if you record, like there was an attorney that told me, oh, they could take the kids in chambers in camera, right? He like kind of leans over and whispers and says, don't think they don't tamper with those in cameras, meaning the court has the ability to tamper with anything, whether it's a video in camera with the children, whether it's transcripts. I was told they even have the ability to tamper with our family wizard because the court has access. Yes.
Wow.
The court has access to that. So anything they have access to, they can tamper with it. And that's why court watchers are important to have whenever you have a hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people will make their own recordings on their end so that when they do get the transcripts, they can compare it and have an actual backup. So sometimes people do that. And even if the court has a sign that says no recording allowed, or if it's their policy, we still have the right to do it. A policy doesn't guide your constitutional rights. And the Supreme Court already has said multiple times that you have the right to record in public, and that's considered a public building.
100%.
So that,
why is it that, in my case, a lot of these hearings were private, but usually in like Supreme Court, I remember at one point when COVID hit, it was virtual. And then when they started opening up the courts, they were very like, individual cases, but normally in Supreme Court, everyone goes in at the same time. There's the morning half and the afternoon half, and they call you by number, and everyone's sitting in that room. So why was, in my case, of course, it was also COVID, but there was a point where there were so many things done privately where they didn't want anyone to witness or hear. I mean, it got to a point where she took me in chambers so she can say what she had to say to scare me. You know, that right there is very highly suspicious.
Yeah, exactly. And all of that is further proof of the racketeering and the fraud, because they know what they're doing. If they have to go off the record to say something, they know that they're not supposed to be saying it. They know that it's intimidation or a threat or manipulation or coercion. And so this is all part of, you know, what's going on, not just in Rockland County, but all over America. And so many women are dealing with this. And it's kind of scary because, you know, I know you have a daughter, I have daughters. Like, for us to think like, you know, one day our kids are going to be in a position where they're going to be in relationships, get married, have kids of their own. And, you know, it's hard, especially a lot of girls, they get married young. They have this idea of, you know, this fairy tale wedding and this happy marriage and everything seems so perfect. And then until it's not. And so, you know, a lot of us didn't have a older sister or mom to look up to give us relationship advice and, you know, to give us guidance. And I feel like, especially with so many young girls being forced away from their mothers through these courts, you know, a lot of women and girls don't have that guidance. So, you know, as somebody who had the marriage and was in the marriage for a long time, and then, you know, went through the divorce and recognized the signs of the narcissistic abuse and the coercive control and everything after the fact, you know, if you could talk to your younger self, or if you were to give advice to, you know, any young girls out there who might be thinking about getting married and, you know, starting a life with a partner, what advice would you give to like any young girls in that situation?
I mean, obviously, you know, go with your gut. The minute you see a red flag, I mean, in my case, 1 month before our wedding, I did return the ring back to my ex-husband at the time, because I did started seeing, especially the way his mother was and how she was very much involved in things that she was doing. I did see the red flags. So definitely, don't feel pressured. Once you start seeing red flags, and the relationship, and have a support group, like a support system. Like, definitely, I didn't have that support from my parents because, you know, their way of living was a little different. This was all new to them. When all of this was happening, they couldn't understand. We can, right? But back then it just wasn't, they were from a small little town in Sicily in the mountains, very different. There was no such thing as divorce. There was no such thing as, so definitely, before you do anything, have a support system, get out, if you are in a marriage, have your own income, have people that you can trust, whether you need to put some money on the side, for emergencies or for situations, because anything can happen. We all want to believe that we get married, we have that fairy tale wedding, we raise our kids, we grow old together. I mean, it's all wonderful things, but unfortunately, the way society is today, we don't have that anymore. And in fact, people, especially the court system, they're not there for your best interest or your children's best interest. Their main goal is to make money. And they see that matrimonial family court cases is where the money is. And so many people can be involved, whether it's therapists, whether it's doctors, whether it's attorneys, whether it's evaluators, anyone can get involved in a case and make money off of it. So, definitely always protect yourself, I think that, that's really it, don't you know, I mean, obviously when it's physical, you see it right away. The manipulating, the verbal abuse, the mental abuse, you don't quite see right away. But, you know, educate yourself, you know, read up about narcissistic abuse, personality disorders. That's a big one. You can't treat someone that has a personality disorder, and narcissists have personality disorders. So, you know, these are things that, you know, mothers, fathers, we teach your children, you know, these things, you know, before they get into a relationship.
Like know the signs to look out for. And like you said, education is huge because many people don't even know what narcissistic personality disorder is. They think it's just people who are in love with how they look, but
I think
that's
at one point, yeah, there was a point where my ex-husband's attorney, Kim Rayner, tried throwing out Munchausen and said, "Oh, we think she has much," you know, like, and I'm like, "What the hell? What's that? Like, what the hell is that?" And I had to like Google it. I was like, "What the?" I go, "Is she serious right now?" I mean, obviously that nothing came out of it, you know, but so many things were thrown out. So I started like educating myself. What is this? What's that? And I'm glad, you know, as horrific of what I've been through, like the experience, I learned so much. I've grown so much. I've learned so much. I don't wish this on anyone, but I have to say, maybe I had to go through all this to really educate and, you know, learn all this because it's important for everyone to know, whether it happens to you or not. I think it's so important that everyone needs to know and be aware, like what's happening behind closed doors within the judicial system, you know?
absolutely. And you know, these days, like you said, like more than half of every marriage ends in divorce. And it's not like the old days where women either couldn't get divorced or didn't want to get divorced or couldn't survive without their husband. And now it's so common that it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, just like the marriage industry. You know, all these people spend 50, 100,000. Some people spend millions on these weddings. That's that industry. But then there's also the divorce industry, the therapists, the supervisors, the drug testers, the judges, the lawyers. And it's a lucrative industry, and it's for profit. It is not for the benefit of the children or anybody or anything. It is strictly for them to make money, and they're destroying lives. And so, I mean, I think it's like you said, everything happens for a reason, and this has made you smarter and stronger, and now you know better so that, you know, you can guide your daughter and other
my son,
girls and your
poor
son. Yeah, because women can be narcissists too. You know, guys can date a girl that's a narcissist, and it's the same thing.
but I don't want him to become a narcissist. You know, remind you, like he's picking up on, you know, things from my ex-husband. You think I want him to treat women like that? Absolutely not. I want him to respect people, to respect the person he's with, be it, you know, like I don't want my son to treat women the way my ex-husband, and he learned it from his mother. His mother thinks no other woman can love you like your mama. You know, no one can make you better meatballs like your mama. These were things that, like, she would say such nonsense.
She's one of those.
And so he thought it's okay to treat other women like this. It's okay to treat people like this, you know, and it's not okay. It's not okay. I don't care if you're a male or a female, like it's just not okay. And I don't want my children to be like that or that person or think it's okay. It's not.
Yeah, and it seems like you and your children had a strong bond, even though
Very
all this
strong.
happened at a young age. And so I think that's good because a lot of people, they lose their bond with their children, or it was never strong to begin with, and then it deteriorates. But even the fact that at 7 years old, your son was raising his
Talking
hand.
to me, asking if when he gets married, will his children be able to live with him?
Yeah, and
Like
saying,
be like like have a family.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that just shows, like, you know, that that's on his mind, and that's the stresses and the trauma and the anxiety. But the fact that he would be brave enough to raise his hand and say, when can I
Yes.
go live with my mommy?
God
And the
bless
judge
him.
just brush him off like that is just so
Yep.
cruel. And it's like, I think that a lot of times boys who grow up seeing their mom struggle or seeing their mom didn't get treated right, they then want to be the type of man who treats the woman correctly. And
Exactly.
hopefully your son will, keep whatever morals that you instilled in him over
Correct.
the years. And again, when the children are 18, that's still so young. They're probably not going to get married at 18. So there's plenty of time for them to really learn, those values and be careful before they get in relationships, because it's not like we can expect our children to never have relationships of their own. It's going to happen, but we need to guide them so that they can not make the same mistakes we did.
Right.
And so,
Absolutely.
I know it's been so hard for you. You've been separated from them, and, as a mother, it's like so painful.
Against my will and against my children's will. Yes. Separated because of the father and the people he brought us in front of in the judicial system. Yes, that's why we've been separated. Not something that I did or not something they wanted or I wanted. It was because of the father. And obviously he was able to make it happen through judicial abuse and legal abuse by this attorney that he's very close and very close friends with, that represents him, and all these other people that worked in the courthouse.
And right now you're living in the same county as
Same
your children.
county. Yeah. Yes. Same county, same school district, because that's what I was told. Had to provide a 3-bedroom home. I did what I was told. Yeah. So I'm in the same county, same school district. Have a room for each, fully furnished with clothes, everything. So if they were to walk in this home, everything would be set up for them. But yet that was not good enough because they're claiming I'm crazy. I'm mentally ill. Can't provide for my kids.
Yeah,
Which-
and it's like you mentioned his lawyers was saying that you accused you of having Munchausen. How
What a
can
joke.
is the lawyer a doctor? Can she
I
diagnose?
think she thought, because there was a time where when I started working, I applied as a teacher assistant. My friend was like, "You're so good with kids. You know them, you raised your kids. You should, get your foot in the door. Just apply as a teacher assistant." I dental assisted for years. So she was like, just do it. So I applied in the county, in the same district as my children. I applied for teaching assistant, and I got hired in an elementary school right away. I subbed one day. By the end of the day, they asked me if I wanted to work there full time. So they absolutely loved me right away, and I accepted. And it so happened to be, at the time, it was in special ed where they had second and third graders, and they mainstreamed, and I assisted with the second graders, and my son at the time was in second grade. And so they took me to court and said to the judge, "Your Honor, this is weird. She works with second graders. It's weird." And the judge was looking at them and was like, "Okay, you've brought a lot of things to me, but I don't know how to respond to this." And I'm looking at them and I'm like, "What's so weird about that?" And they're like, "Your Honor, it's weird because their son is in second grade and she's talking to the kids about her job. And this is just weird and it's inappropriate." And I'm like, "What is she talking about?" But these were the things. And I go, "Wait, so I had to pay my attorney to come to court about this? This is what we're arguing about?" I was like, and is this serious?" That was one of many things that she would do, this attorney. Waste my time, waste my attorney's time, had to pay for an attorney to show up, wasted the judge's time. It would aggravate it would aggravate everyone. It was, then it was Munchausen, then it was this, and then they tried getting me fired from the job. "Your Honor, she shouldn't be teaching assistant. Trying to get me fired." She's like, "I can't get her fired. Like, what do you want me to do?" And then that's when there were other attempts where he would contact the administrators, the superintendent, to try to get me fired from working as a teacher assistant in the community.
That's absolutely terrible. And it seems like your lawyers that you had did nothing to stick up for you, or it's like they were
No,
just,
I mean, yeah, because I think they knew they knew where we stood. You know, obviously the judge was going to entertain this nonsense. She allowed it to be heard in court. I mean, these weren't like most motions that she filed. These were ex parte calls to the law clerk saying, we need an emergency hearing. These were emergency hearings. I don't
wow.
see what the emergency is. Now, if a child wasn't in danger, yeah, okay, that's an emergency. But these were we would have to go in as an emergency hearing without even a motion being submitted. It was a phone call to the law clerk to have this emergency in-person emergency hearing. So, I mean, it's very obvious. You sort of pick up on this is definitely a fixed case, and there's something wrong with this. This doesn't seem right.
And that's the law clerk that went to high school with your ex-husband, right?
They didn't go to the same school. They graduated the same year with having the same mutual friends. They definitely knew each other during high school years. Yes.
So your ex
He actually
is
got,
from this
there was
county.
complaints against Shira Krantz. And I don't know exactly what happened, but she was removed as Eisenpress's law clerk. Don't know where, nor do I care where she is now. They assigned her a new law clerk after other complaints. You
And
know,
so you said that now your daughter is 17, and how old is your
she's
son?
going to be like in April, the beginning of April, she'll be 17. Yeah, she's 16 and a half. She's aging out.
And your
Yeah,
son?
and there's a lot of, my son's 12 and a half. And I've received a lot of content of very alarming things. Like, it's just very, very concerning. I'm very concerned as a mother. Any mother should be. And I worry about her safety. It almost seems like she's being pimped out the way you could tell she's being pushed every weekend, like out and about, like she's not being supervised. There's no structure. There's definitely something going on. Now, my ex likes to throw out there, Your Honor, she's an honor student. And any child really can be an honor student if they could take like a cooking class. You know what I'm saying? And then they do well. They're you know, I'm sure my ex, when he was in college, he was paying people to write his papers. He was selling pot. He had a pot business for a year. And at the time that was illegal in college in Florida. He went to Florida Atlantic. And so he was selling pot and he had a business going and he was paying people off to write his papers. So he definitely knows how to manipulate things and making sure my daughter is doing well in school, whether she's putting the effort in or he's doing it for her. It's very easy to do stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? And then to use that as they're like, oh, they're fine with me. They're totally fine with me. That's not enough. There's children who have been sexually abused who do well in school. And meanwhile, they're being sexually abused at home. So you can't go by how well they're doing in school. Yes, those are signs that if a child starts to do, not do well, yeah, it could be, that could be a sign, but it's not something to look at. You need to focus on other things that, that may be concerning, whether a child is being abused or being neglected or other things, and that's the problem with court, is that they want to physically see things, and even that is not even, it's frowned upon. If a parent says, listen, I think my child is being sexually abused, that parent, they're going to frown upon that parent and retaliate on that parent, even though that parent has evidence or says, no, I do think, and I want you to investigate it, which a court should investigate and not retaliate on that parent. But in the system, they enable abuse. They need the abuse to continue because that's how they make money. They're not there to protect the children.
Absolutely. And, it's like such a, 16, 17, it's such a fragile age for, young girl. And I'm sure that a lot of this trauma and forced separation from you and everything else that your daughter and both your kids have been exposed to, affects them in different ways. And, myself, like I had a very, very abusive home life and childhood, but I was A+ student, always getting honors and everything like that. But because it was like when I was at school, I could be normal. I could focus on what it was. And it was the one thing that I could control was my grades versus everything else in my life. But that doesn't mean that outside of school, there's not abuse and trauma and pain. So, I mean, if there was something that, if you could speak to your daughter today, and if there's something that you could tell her, and if there's something you could tell your son, a message for them that you wish they could know, what would you say to them?
Oh, I mean, that I love them. I'll never stop loving them. That I pray for them every single day. Speak your truth. Don't be afraid. Don't let your father, your grandma, whoever, anyone that's manipulating you, don't let them manipulate you and put fear in you. Continue to speak up, and stay strong. I know in my heart, we're all going to get out of this situation. We're going to survive this. Because the last thing I want is for anything to happen to my children. And that I'm not giving up. I remember my daughter when the judge switched custody and gave him full. And I remember I was on a text thread with the attorney for my child, for my daughter, and her saying, "Mom, please don't give up. Don't give up on us. Please, Mommy, don't give up." And I stand by that. I'm not going to give up. So
I know that you are.
And I'm here in Rockland County. Mommy's here waiting for you. You can ring my doorbell. You can come. The door is open. I love them. I will never forget them, stop loving them. And I'm going to do everything in my power to fight for their rights. I'm going to continue to advocate for them. I'm going to continue to advocate for parents, loving parents that are going through this. And yeah, I'm not gonna stop spreading awareness. I'm gonna continue to talk about my story, my journey. My ex tried putting a gag order at one point on me. I think at that time it was during a trial. So no one's gonna stop me from speaking, talking about my journey and speaking the truth. I never had the opportunity to tell my side of the story. Every time I went into court, I was constantly defending myself. And because of the way the judge treated me and handled the case, I was already looked as if I did something wrong in the community. And I remember there was a time when my daughter was in middle school, when she started middle school. She was going to therapists there, psychologists there, counselors there, because she was trying to get help. She's like, "Get me out of this situation. I need help. No one's helping me." And I remember my ex would tell them, "Oh, just ignore her. The judge did, and so they wouldn't help her. And I remember one psychiatrist, I think she was like a psychologist. She's the 7th grade psychologist at Felix Vesta. She said to my daughter, "Is your mother on drugs? Why is it that you can't see her? Is your mother?" And my daughter was devastated. How could you say that to her? For so long, she was trying to protect herself, trying to get through all this. All of these people telling her, "There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with your mom," constantly manipulating the situation, trying to coerce them to believe something that wasn't true. And now she's at her school where she thinks, okay, maybe I can get some help. Someone could believe me. Someone can listen to me. and not even get that in the school. You know, like she figured, okay, it's outside of the court. It's, you know, and she couldn't even get the help somewhere else. And I think that's when she was like, oh my gosh, like this is my life. I can't, I'm not, I don't have like support or help. I can't be protected. So that was hard on me, you know, you know, I'm, you know, any parent, it's devastating for them where they feel like they can't protect their children. It's hard.
Absolutely. And you expect these court systems to do just that. And that's what our taxes pay for. But then the reality is they don't. They're not protecting the children. They're traumatizing our children and ruining our lives. But you clearly, you know, have been targeted by the system and all of these people who work together in this tight-knit community, and they try to destroy you, but you've only come out stronger in the end.
Way
And
stronger. I mean, listen, we have our moments, you know, we feel like defeated, and then we're like, no, you didn't defeat me. You just, you know, you gave me an idea, or I learned something from this, you know,
Exactly.
and I'm going to keep going.
Exactly. And like,
Mhm.
you know, you've done a lot to keep yourself together. And, you know, a lot of moms, ones that we know in the past, like they cannot cope. It's a
Yeah.
lot, and you need to be really, really strong to get through this. And you've done a lot of, you know, healing, and you've gotten to a place where you seem to be in a good position. You have a home ready for your children whenever they're ready to come to you, whether the court makes that happen or it happens on its own.
Whether they make it happen, right? Whether I
Exactly.
make it happen anywhere, it's always, the door is always open.
And they're lucky to have a mother like you, because
Thank
a
you.
lot of moms out there, they, you know, obviously it seems like you're super loyal and that
Yeah.
you're just dedicated and devoted to your children. And that's the main thing
And
in
I've
your life.
always been, but it was frowned upon. In fact, in the one forensic evaluation from Mark Mednick, he made a statement in the report saying, my relationship with my daughter is enmeshed. They acknowledge the father's anger and how he's blaming me for everything. They acknowledge all that, the narcissistic trait, right? But then they said, because I have such a great relationship with my kids, he categorized that as if it was enmeshed. Again, another
So
term I didn't
basically,
understand, and I
you
had
have
to
a
Google
bond.
it. And I'm like, what's this? And I did, and I go, well, okay. Number one, how is it a bad thing that I have a very close, good relationship with my daughter? I mean, any parent would want, whether it's a mother or a father, would want that good relationship with the parent. I mean, that's what you want. It doesn't, you know, I don't see how the court should frown upon that. That doesn't make sense. You want that relationship where a child feels comfortable talking to the parent and confiding. There's so many kids that are hiding things, doing things, being, you know, manipulated and peer pressure, especially as, you know, as teenagers, you know, and my daughter's a teenager. You want them to be able to confide in with their parents. But the court was using that as if it was a bad thing. What does that tell you about the court?
Yeah.
Or
It's
the
a
forensic
clown.
evaluator was using that as to weaponize me as if, oh, father should be, you know, temporarily have custody. You know, the way they determined it was a recommendation. It wasn't even findings. It was a recommendation where they wanted me to go through these phases to get to the 50-50. And I don't think they thought I could. I don't think they thought I could. And I believe also they used it as a tactic for me to never get past the phases. It was a way of trapping me. It was 100% a way of trapping me. And looking back, I definitely was trapped, you know.
Yeah, and you never got due process. You never had
Never.
a trial where you had to have witnesses and cross
No, I
exam.
wasn't allowed. It was too late. I couldn't subpoena witnesses. I was told by the attorney that stole my money out of my escrow account. I was told that it's too late. I was told that I couldn't have witnesses. I was told that I couldn't I couldn't take the stand. Then I was coerced to not continue the trial and to agree to these phases because to get away from this judge because she has something against you. I was told by attorneys these things. I was told by attorneys that she is your God now. She's not my God and she'll never be my God. But these judges think they're God. I was told that, what did you do to piss off this judge? Because they saw how she was reacting, behaving toward me. And I'm like, nothing. I don't retaliate or lash out in court. I'm very calm. At one point, toward the end, when things were getting really, crazy, she was flipping out, threatening my ADA advocate. I'm going to put you in jail. I'm going to put you in jail. Every time I would step foot in the courtroom, she was threatening to put anyone in jail. So if anything, I ended up with, getting a panic attack. I was like, this woman I was very calm, that she had to kick everyone out of her courtroom because she knew if anything was to happen to any of us, she would be held accountable for it. So to save her, butt, she was like, everyone get out of my courtroom, screaming at everyone, get the hell out, get out of my courtroom. Because she knew she was saying things that were inappropriate. There were times where I was reciting my rights and she would say, strike that off the record, strike it off the record. She wasn't allowing me to say anything, on the record. Numerous times during court hearings, she would tell the stenographers to stop recording because she didn't want it documented. Numerous times. It didn't happen once in a while. It happened very often. She was trying to conduct attorneys only conferences so many times, to a point where someone I had, as I was started educating myself, I was advised not to allow that I have, as a litigant, I have the right to be at all hearings, all conferences. I have the right to be there. So I witness and know what's being said and what's going on and what's being decided on my behalf. You know what I'm saying? So there's so many things that the courts do that people don't know that shouldn't be happening. Like they need to, you really need to educate yourself that these attorneys only conferences should not be happening. Absolutely not.
And like everything that you just said is very important, because a lot of people need to realize that when you talk about RICO, a lot of people think it's just civil or criminal, but in criminal RICO and in any crime, one of the biggest things is somebody having that criminal intent. Because
Correct.
A judge can just say, oh, well, I made a mistake, I made a legal error, I made a mistake. But if they intentionally do something to obstruct justice, knowingly doing it, that is a crime. And so the fact that she would say things like strike that off
the record. Yep.
Or intentionally stop you from saying your rights on the record, those are showing that she's intentionally doing it. Therefore, she's aware that what she's doing is a crime, and she
Correct.
doesn't want your objections on the record, because then it would help you.
Correct.
In other words. So
Correct.
I think that it's good that you have documented so much of this. It's good that you have remembered everything, even during the times when it wasn't recorded, and all of that is going to be good for you in the long run. But this corruption is insane. It's happening everywhere. It's happening to so many people. But by you speaking up and sharing your story, hopefully maybe somebody else in Rockland County or New York or anywhere listening might feel, stronger or more inspired to speak up about what's happening to them. And the more people that keep speaking up, the harder it will be for them to get away with this. And the fact that this judge still has a job is unacceptable. And which county is she in now? Do you know?
She's in Orange County, Goshen, New York.
Okay. So she's still
it's the next county up. Yeah, a little more upstate from Rockland, like Goshen, New York. It's Orange County.
Okay. And if any other moms out there or dads are from Rockland County, or even anyone else in, within the surrounding areas that maybe have similar experiences or dealt with some of these lawyers or same judges, would you Can they reach out to you and you guys connect?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And you're on Facebook and are you on TikTok as well?
I am on TikTok. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just want to thank you again for taking the time to come on, and thank you so much for sharing your story. And I really wish the best for you. And I hope that you and your children will be together again soon and all of this will be
Thank you.
behind you.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem.